In this video, we're going to take a look at the worst case of demon possession on record. But before we dive into that passage, I want to set the context here in Luke chapter 8. Jesus had just calmed the wind and the sea in verses 22 to 25. It says in verse 22, "Now it happened on a certain day that he got into a boat with his disciples, and he said to them, 'Let us cross over to the other side of the lake.' And they launched out. But as they sailed, he fell asleep, and a windstorm came down on the lake, and they were filling with water and were in jeopardy. And they came to him and awoke him, saying, 'Master, Master, we are perishing.' Then he arose and rebuked the wind and the raging of the water, and they ceased, and there was calm. But he said to them, 'Where is your faith?' And they were afraid and marveled, saying to one another, 'Who can this be? For he commands even the winds and water, and they obey him.'" So that's the context. That's what has just happened. Jesus with the disciples are going across the Sea of Galilee for this encounter of this demon-possessed man here in Luke chapter 8 and verse 26. It says, "Then they sailed to the country of the Gadarenes, which is opposite Galilee. And when he stepped out on the land, there met him a certain man from the city who had demons for a long time. And he wore no clothes, nor did he live in a house, but in the tombs." There's no question that the disciples are a little dumbstruck at what they had just seen on the sea. Their response even was, "Who is this? What kind of a man is this that calms the wind and the sea?" But they're about to face a storm of a different kind. As I said, we have here the worst case of demon possession on record. And here is a man who is under the total control of darkness. And look at what we learn about this wild man. It says he was a man of the tombs. He lived in the midst of death. But the most interesting detail is the reason why Jesus was there. And he was there for the purpose of saving this man. In Luke chapter 19, we have the story of Jesus saving another man whose story you've probably heard, and that man's name was Zacchaeus. Also in John chapter 3, we see Jesus visiting with Nicodemus at night, one of the Pharisees. And in John chapter 4, Jesus visiting with the woman at the well, the woman from Samaria. And so we see this quite often where Jesus meets with just one person, which really shows us the value of one's soul to the Lord. But in Luke chapter 19, verse 10, and that's in the context of Zacchaeus, it says, "For the Son of Man is come to seek and to save that which was lost." And so that's what the Lord did when he was here. And he's still doing that today. He's seeking to save those who are lost. So the disciples with Jesus crossed the sea to the eastern shore, the country of the Gadarenes, it says. The area that they were in was near the cities of Gadara and Gergesa, also Gerasa, so there's several G's there, which was southwest of the Sea of Galilee. Gadara was actually a city not far from the lake Gennesareth, and it was one of the 10 cities that were called Decapolis. Gergesa was a city about 12 miles to the southeast of Gadara and about 20 miles to the east of Jordan. And that area was predominantly Gentile, which is obvious when we see the herd of swine a little bit later on here in verse 32. Verse 28 says, "When he saw Jesus, he cried out," and as often is the case, that means he screamed, "fell down before him, and with a loud voice said, 'What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High? I beg you, do not torment me.'" Notice that the demon, or as we see here in just a moment, demons, knew who Jesus was. Jesus is the creator, and they knew that. They are created beings. They're fallen angels. In James chapter 2, verse 19, it says, "The demons believe and tremble." So the demons have a belief that produced fear and respect. But verse 29, it says, "For he had commanded the unclean spirit to come out of the man, for it had often seized him, and he was kept underground, bound with chains and shackles. And he broke the bonds and was driven by the demon into the wilderness. Again, I don't even think we can imagine the severity of this demon possession. Mark's account in Mark chapter 5, verses 4 and 5 says, because that he had been often bound with fetters and chains, and the chains had been plucked asunder by him, and the fetters broken in pieces, neither could any man tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying and cutting himself with stones. This is a very vivid picture. We see him chained. We see him crying out or screaming. We see him cutting himself with stones. And we have in this man a picture of sin. It will lead to total, complete self-destruction. And many, many people probably watching this video can give testimony to the truth of that statement. Somebody said years ago with regards to sin, sin will take you further than you want to go, keep you longer than you want to stay, and cost you more than you're willing to pay. This man had been completely overtaken by darkness and sin. We're told here in verse 30, Jesus asked him saying, what is your name? And he said, Legion, because many demons had entered him. In the Roman army, a legion consisted of between 3,000 and 6,000 soldiers. A full or complete Roman legion had 6,826 men. So how many demons exactly this man was possessed by, we don't know. It's impossible to say. It doesn't say, in fact, but somewhere, again, looking at the range between 3,000 and 6,000. So it's very safe to say that it was a considerable amount. Verse 31 says, and they begged him that he would not command them to go out into the abyss. Again, we see a fear and a respect because they know who Jesus is. Verse 32, now a herd of many swine was feeding there on the mountain. So they begged him that he would permit them to enter them, and he permitted them. We know in Matthew's account, he says one word, and that is go. And as a result, they have no choice. They have to go. Verse 33, then the demons went out of the man and entered the swine, and the herd ran violently down the steep place into the lake and drowned. That would have been quite a sight to see, these hundreds, even 2,000 or 3,000 swine just coming down the hill and going into the sea and drowning as they're overtaken by these demons that were in this one man. So again, it really gives us a vivid picture of just how many demons were possessing this man. Verse 34 says, when those who fed them saw what had happened, they fled and told it in the city and in the country. I can imagine that this was a sight you'd never forget. Those that were taking care of these pigs and feeding them, and when they saw what happened, they just ran away and went into the city and told everybody what they had seen. Verse 35, then they went out to see what had happened. This would be one of those stories you'd say, I got to see this for myself. It says, then they went out to see what had happened and came to Jesus and found the man from whom the demons had departed, sitting at the feet of Jesus, clothed and in his right mind, and they were afraid. It's amazing that this man who people were afraid of when he was demon possessed, but when they see the change that Jesus has made in his life, they're even more afraid, really, watching him in his normal conditions, sitting at the feet of Jesus. He's clothed, he's in his right mind. And again, this also produces fear with the people when they see the man for themselves. It says, verse 36, they also who had seen it told them by what means he who had been demon-possessed was healed. So this was also part of the story. When they were sharing with the people in the city what had happened, they also said that Jesus had cast out these demons and dismissed them from the man into the swine. Verse 37, then the whole multitude of the surrounding region of the Gadarenes asked him to depart from them, for they were seized with great fear, and he got into a boat and returned. The response of the people. They're afraid at what they've seen, and they ask Jesus, would you leave? Would you please just leave? The words in verse 37, translated great fear in the Greek, is megas phobos. We get the word phobia from it, And of course, we get mega, we think of large. And so it's megas phobos, which is great fear. The people were just absolutely terrified by this, especially knowing the condition of the man demon-possessed and now seeing the condition of him after he had a confrontation with Jesus. Verse 38, now the man from whom the demons had departed begged him that he might be with him, but Jesus sent him away, saying, return to your own house and tell what great things God has done for you. And he went his way and proclaimed throughout the whole city what great things Jesus had done for him. This is kind of a unique account in that this man asks Jesus if he could follow him, and Jesus says, no, you need to go back and share your testimony, and as he says here, report what great things God has done for you. By the way, the area where he went, as Jesus told him to go and share his testimony, was Decapolis, and that was the area where the feeding of the 4,000 took place. We don't know this for sure, but it's been speculated by some Bible scholars that he did a really good job at sharing his testimony, and word spread not only from him directly, but from him sharing his testimony with others and them also sharing that story with other people as well, because we have, again, feeding the 4,000, predominantly Gentiles, and that was just the men, like with the feeding of the 5,000. So we don't know how many thousands more there actually were when you count the women and the children. But if that is a connection between this man and his testimony, safe to say that he did a good job at sharing his testimony. Verse 40, so it was when Jesus returned that the multitude welcomed him, for they were all waiting for him. That is, when they returned to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, they were waiting for him. They were looking for him. They were expecting his return. Well, thank you for taking time to watch this video, and I really appreciate you watching the video all the way to the end. I invite you to check out the other videos on the channel, and also please like this video, give it a thumbs up, and share the video with someone else that might be encouraged and blessed by it, and also subscribe. All of those things are helpful to the channel and much appreciated. So once again, thank you for visiting The Essential Truth. This is Pastor Dave. You have a blessed day.